Good day to you, and here I am in my office once again. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at the way this office is arranged with the bookshelves against the case. There's the door with a coat rack, and then, hey, here is the focal point of the office, the computer. Imagine, if you will, how different this office might look if there was no computer. I might have, for example, a table in the middle of the office so that people can sit all around all sides and that the people become the focus of the office rather than the computer. But no, instead, I've got a computer and that's what's set up first, and then everything else is arranged around that computer. Even the desk itself is designed specifically for the computer. And the desk is not, in fact, in the middle of the office like I suggested it might be, because it has to be next to the wall where the outlets are so that I can plug in the computer. And so this then also influences the way that I communicate with my students. You know, when I'm sitting here and my students come in through the door, and because of the computer on a desk, there's a desk in between the students and me when they come in and gain advising and talk about issues related to the classes. So this is my way of introducing what our subject is all about today, because it's all about the subject of technologically mediated personal relationships. In other words, the focus of today's chapter is on how technology is influencing our relationships. And in the context of social media, we want to discuss how the technology of phones and of our computers and of our tablets influences the way that we communicate with each other. Even the clothes that you're wearing today, for example, you've got pockets that have been designed to hold your cell phone. Cell phones have gotten a lot bigger since the old flip phone days and slider phones, and now phones like the iPhone 8 Plus, etc. They are big phones. And so costuming, or our accessories, are all fitting around the technology that we use to communicate. So let's focus more intently in on some of the subjects talked about today. The chapter is pretty simple, although you may find some of the writing a little bit dense, because it is research-based writing, number one. It tries to cite studies where possible to back up the claims. And secondly, because it is written by a British author, an English author to be precise. She's of English heritage, and so you will see a difference in some writing styles. There's really only 4 concepts that we want to get across today. I'm going to branch off from some of what the author wrote to talk about those 4 concepts and add my own thinking to them. So the first idea we want to talk about is mediated relationships. And the author makes the point that in the olden days, that we used to think that any technology that comes in between two people when they're speaking lessens the depth of the relationship. It makes the relationship not as rich. That's the way that things used to be thought of. You know, if I want to speak to you in person, we can look at each other, we can laugh, we know a certain facial expression that each other have had over time that says it all, right? That look we can think of when we think of another person. That look has so much meaning in and of itself. That is a really rich dimension to our relationship. That look comes about over time. However, when you write a letter to somebody, you don't get a person's voice. When you send an email to a person, you don't see any body language. When you send a text to somebody, although you can include an emoji, again, you have certain elements that are missing as part of that interaction. And so the thinking used to be that any technology that we use to speak with somebody else, in other words, it comes in between us, that's why it's called media, media comes in between, that is seen as an experience that was not as rich until recently. But now the theories are shifting in the other direction, that actually mediated communication can extend the richness of our connections with others, because mediated communication goes across boundaries of space and time. Think about that for a moment, if you will. If you want to speak to somebody right now and they're not in the same town as you, well, you're not going to be able to speak to them until you get to go visit them, until you take a road trip, until you go home, until you get in your car, except you have your phone. And now you can speak to them using FaceTime on Facebook, or you can give them a call, or you can send them a text message. So that idea of space has been transcended by media, that we can cross over space. And whereas we wouldn't have a connection with a person who lives in another town, let's say you have a friend from high school who's gone to another college and you wouldn't see them, and so that's going to affect the depth of the relationship, not seeing them. Well, guess what? You can see them on your computer now. You can see them on your phone. You can text them. You can hear their voice on the phone. So there is a shift in thinking now that media allow us to cross over those boundaries, and that allows us to deepen the relationship. Also, time is a boundary that has been transcended. Again, if you want to get together with somebody, it has to be at your mutual convenience, right? You want to go to see a movie? Oh, I can't. I have to work. Okay, I guess we're not going to see a movie, and we have to wait until another time to get together. Not so anymore. You can go to the movie by yourself, and you're at the mall and you're texting them all about the movie. You can post your review of that movie. Many people are posting about Return of the Jedi, the latest Star Wars film, on Facebook, and at least some of my Facebook friends are posting their reviews of it. Okay, now you are having a conversation with that person, or you're at least seeing what they're saying, and it's crossing the time boundary. So mediated relationships today, it's an interesting question, isn't it? Does your little gadget that you're holding in your hand right now to watch this video or to text somebody, is that deepening your relationship, or is it making it more shallow? Next up is the idea of polymedia. I think this is a very interesting idea. I had an experience this morning that I don't know if you've had, but it was very frustrating. The experience is I went to change my password for my Yahoo account because I couldn't remember my password when I logged in. Like so many of you, we have our passwords saved on certain computers, and it's automatically saved so we can just log right into whatever email account you have. Well, somehow, I guess I cleared my cookies or my browser history on my home computer, and I couldn't get into Yahoo. So I went to change the password. I changed the password on my computer, and then I thought I better change it on my cell phone too, especially since I'm going away to Mexico. And when I went to change the password on my cell phone, or when I went to use the password on my cell phone that I had already changed on my computer, my cell phone wouldn't let me into Yahoo. Very frustrating. What that means is Yahoo is in control, and the agent of Yahoo is in control. I have to follow Yahoo's rules. So to try and resolve this, I went onto their website to try and find a way to call them. You cannot call Yahoo. You have to go through a series of questions that are posted to their bulletin board and see if you can figure it out and reset your password, and they send a code to your phone, and it was not working this morning. Yahoo's in control. Very, very frustrating. So my answer is, you know what? I'm not going to use Yahoo. I'm going to send messages through my ESU email account, or I'm going to send it through Facebook Messenger. And this is speaking to the concept of polymedia. That today, we have so many means of communicating that we are in control, not the agent of the mass medium, not the people who are in charge of the television programs that you're receiving, not the people who are in charge of the email account that you have, not Apple as a company. None of these companies have the kind of control over your communication that they used to have, because you have so many means at your disposal to communicate today, using so many different software programs and so many gadgets. So polymedia has in essence empowered the individual beyond what the individual has been empowered with in the past. Next up is a concept called media socialization. Media socialization is about where and when media are used and what is appropriate with that media use. As you're sitting down to your Christmas dinner, how many of you are going to take out that phone and your mother is going to give you that look? Put it away. Because it's seen as inappropriate to have a phone at the dinner table with it blinking and going off with notifications. And within that, it's interrupting, according to some people, what should be a free-flowing dialogue between people who haven't seen each other for a while. So media socialization is about where and when it's appropriate to use media. Professors face this all the time in the classroom. They have policies about you do not use your cell phone in class, do not use your cell phone in class, do not use your cell phone in class, and still students can be seen throughout the class like this, sneaking a quick peek or putting their phone down. Some students use phones to take notes on. Yeah, that's totally appropriate. But where and when does the phone become a nuisance to others? I know that when I teach my class Intro to Mass Media, the plan that I've come up with is I designate the first 10 rows of this 200 student class, I designate the first 10 rows as a no cell phone zone area. And every other row after that, you can sit in if you want to use your cell phone all during class. And that's because I know that some students don't want to have the distraction of somebody next to them while they're trying to take notes, whereas others, they want to use their phone. And in fact, it's a real struggle for professors today because we actually want students to be able to use their phones if it is useful to learning information. I've observed a couple professors in my capacity as department chair where they've actually said, okay, take out your phones and see if you can find the origination of this concept. See if you can find who is the person behind how this theory was developed. Then the cell phone becomes a very useful tool. But when does it drag things down? When do you go home and you're with your significant other and they're not looking you in the eye? They're checking their Twitter, they're checking their Snapchat, they're checking their Instagram. When does it get in the way? That's what media socialization is all about, where and when media are used. And then the last concept that is talked about in this chapter is the concept of the moral imperative. And this is the idea that along with every piece of technology comes a certain morality with when it's appropriate to use or not. For example, email is very different from texting. Email is a formal channel of communication. It's used in business and professional-like settings for the most part. Email is very difficult, again, talking about the professor vantage point here, to use with students because students just don't like to use email, generally speaking. They would rather be texted. And so professors, they want to send out emails because it's going through the official ESU email channel, and any return response from a student is not going to get grabbed by the spam guardian. So we want to use emails. But students want to use texting. And so a lot of times what happens is students, when they use email, they send a text-like message. A text-like message is read in a totally different circumstance. Email is normally read in the office place or a professional setting, whereas texting could be read anywhere. You could be sitting on your couch at home and you're getting a text. You could be sitting on a bus. You could be in your car driving and a text comes across. So because of those situations, texting is a lot more informal. The use of the word I, for example, is rarely capitalized by people who are texting because that's an extra thumb press on the keyboard. And similarly, words like C, S-E-E, are abbreviated as C because it's extra typing within a texting situation. Twitter is a social media platform that also has this similar kind of constraint because there are only so many characters you can use in Twitter. I think it's 240 now characters that you can use, but you're consciously aware of collapsing your words and letters, etc., to get it into the Twitter framework. And so the moral imperative that I'm trying to get at here is when I receive an email from a student that first of all doesn't say "Dear Professor" or "Hello" or Dr. Mackenzie or Rob, that just gets right to the question, when is the exam? Or I can't get on to my D2L, what should I do? And furthermore, if that message also contains a small letter I send it right back. And I say, use proper grammar and use a salutation, because that's what is expected of email. It is a moral imperative. Now, the book uses the example to hit home a little bit more of two people or one person who's breaking up with another person. Generally speaking, the person who is being broken up with will see it as a cowardly or immoral move if you break up with them with a text and then don't respond to text. Or if you break up with them by leaving a voicemail message when you know that they can't answer the phone. They would rather see you in person so that they have the chance, if they still want to continue the relationship, through their body language, through their demonstration of emotion, through their personality in essence, to try and convince you, don't break up with me, we can work things out. But the moral imperative in play here comes into play, I should say, if you don't give that person a chance. It's seen as unfair, it's seen as cowardly. So there are moral imperatives that come with every single mass medium that we use. And that brings us to the last concept that I want to get across today. It's a concept that cuts across all four media. It's a concept that's going to be the basis for your discussion question today. And it's called the affordability of a mass medium. The affordability. Now the book uses that term in different contexts, and basically what it gets at is, what does a mass medium afford a user? What are the advantages of a mass medium, both in terms of how it is used and also the content that appears on it that is due to its inherent nature of the mass medium? Now, I don't want to go into social media to use as an example because I want you to think this out on your own today with the discussion question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use television as an example, and then you can draw from that the kinds of things that I'm trying to say about the affordability of television. Where is your television right now? Similar to how I talked about my office today, I bet it's in your family room or your living room or whatever that room is where it's common space for everybody. So first of all, the TV is probably in common space. Secondly, it probably is the first thing that's arranged and everything else is arranged around it. The couches that you have, if you have more than one, are not facing each other so that people can talk to each other. Now, the couches are either facing the television or they are arranged in such a way that you can lie down and watch the television. And sometimes the television will even be blocking a window in your home. That is, it's preventing you from seeing the outdoors and having a connection with nature because it's the only place the TV could go for everybody in the room to be able to see it, or for the most people to be able to see that TV. And it has to be close to an electrical outlet. So right away, that then influences the way that people communicate. When you sit down next to somebody in a TV room, you're usually sitting side by side. You're not facing opposite them. And that leads to a completely different style of communication. For example, if you're a female and you have a boyfriend who comes over and your father is in the house, they sit down side by side. And what are they most likely to talk about? They're going to be likely to talk about the football game that they're both watching. Now, that may be an advantage. It may be a great way to break the ice. But they're not facing each other, and the father's asking the father's asking the man questions, or the boy is asking the father questions. That's not what's happening because they're not sitting face to face. They're talking about something that they're both looking at. It completely influences the way they're speaking. Similarly, the content on television is also afforded by the medium itself. Think about TV news. Think about big city TV news. What would you say is the most common leading story on a big city TV newscast if you've watched very many TV newscasts? If your answer is either a crime story or a fire story, then you're right. And that is because television, as a visual medium that also has audio, is more inclined to present really visually sensational things. And a fire is about as sensational as you can get. It's these bright orange dancing flames. It almost looks like a campfire in your living room if you're watching a fire. And so TV is really good at telling things like that. It has an affordability for high visual things. And radio, on the other hand, if you're listening to a radio news story, radio news is not going to lead with a fire because it doesn't have the affordability of presenting visual images. Instead, it's going to lead with something that has a sound to it. So instead, you might have a quote from a politician, or you might have a whistle blown during a controversial call in a football game, or you might have a child crying. That's because the affordability of radio is more geared towards oral dimension. So now think about that for your own social media platforms that you're using, because after all, there are major differences, although there are similarities as well, between Snapchat, between Instagram, between Twitter, and between Facebook. There are major differences in the way that those are set up, and that's going to get at your discussion question today. So as you focus on technology, I'll be very interested in reading your answers. Have a great day.